My name is Adriana. I am 28 years old. For 5 years, I avoided my father's side of the family after years of subtle rejection, especially from my Aunt Eleanor. When Dad texted me an invitation to Christmas dinner this year, I thought maybe things would be different. I spent hours selecting thoughtful gifts, drove 40 miles through light snow, and arrived with hope in my heart. But when Aunt Eleanor opened the door, rolled her eyes and said those words, everything changed. If you have ever felt the sting of family rejection during what should be the happiest time of year, drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have experienced holiday family drama too, because this Christmas story is about to take an unexpected turn. My childhood memories of Christmas used to be filled with warmth. I remember sitting on my grandfather William's lap as he read The Night Before Christmas with his deep rumbling voice. My cousins Allison and Bradley would fight over who got to put the star on top of the tree, while my grandmother Martha baked gingerbread cookies that filled the house with the scent of cinnamon and cloves. Back then, I belonged. Everything changed when I was 12. My parents split up after my mother, Catherine, discovered my father, James, had been having an affair with Patricia, a woman from his office. The divorce was messy, painful, and left my mother struggling to pay bills, while my father moved into a spacious new home with Patricia just 3 months later. They were married before the ink on the divorce papers was dry. Aunt Eleanor, my father's older sister, immediately closed ranks. She had always been protective of James, even when they were children, according to my mother. "Your aunt thinks your father can do no wrong," Mom would say with a sigh. She enabled his worst behaviors since they were kids. While my mother worked double shifts as a nurse to keep our modest apartment, my father's new family seemed to flourish. Patricia came from money, and their house in the wealthy suburb of Meadowbrook became the new gathering place for all family events. At first, I was still invited, but always as an awkward addition, rather than a true part of the family. "Do you need money for a proper dress?" Aunt Eleanor asked me at one Thanksgiving when I was 14, loudly enough for everyone to hear, even though my outfit had been carefully selected and saved for. "Patricia always makes sure the table looks nice." The implication was clear I did not. As I entered high school, the invitations became less frequent. "We thought you would be busy with your mother," or "we assumed you had other plans," became common excuses. By the time I was in college studying graphic design on scholarship, I was effectively excommunicated from family gatherings, without anyone ever saying it directly. The last Christmas I attended was 5 years ago when I was 23. I had just graduated and landed my first design job. I brought gifts I could barely afford and endured 3 hours of questions about why I chose such an unstable career instead of something practical like my cousin Allison, who was in medical school. That night, I overheard Aunt Eleanor in the kitchen telling my stepmother Patricia, "I do not know why James feels obligated to invite her every year. Catherine poisoned her against us anyway." Patricia had murmured something in response. I could not quite hear, but neither of them defended me. I stopped accepting invitations after that. My father would occasionally call or text on my birthday or major holidays, but the conversations were brief and superficial. "How is work?" he would ask, never remembering what projects I was working on, or even the name of the design agency where I had been employed for years. So when his text message appeared on my phone 3 weeks before Christmas this year, I was surprised. "Adriana, we are having Christmas dinner at the house this year, 3 p.m. Your grandmother has been asking about you. Would be nice if you could make it." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. When I called my mother to ask her advice, she was cautious. "Honey, you know I will support whatever you decide," she said. "But protect your heart. They have not exactly been welcoming in the past." "Grandma Martha is getting older," I replied. "Maybe this is a chance to reconnect before it is too late." "Just remember, you have people who love you unconditionally," Mom said. "You do not need to seek approval from those who have not earned the right to give it." Despite her warning, I decided to accept the invitation. I spent hours shopping for perfect gifts on my limited budget. For my grandmother, I found a vintage brooch similar to one she had lost years ago. For my father, a leather-bound notebook with his initials, knowing he still preferred writing by hand to using computers. I even purchased gifts for Aunt Eleanor and Patricia, choosing an elegant scarf for my aunt, and a cookbook featuring Italian recipes for my stepmother, who had mentioned wanting to learn Italian cooking the last time I saw her. I wrapped each present with care, using the techniques I had learned from my mother, who believed the presentation of a gift was as important as what was inside. I wrote heartfelt cards to accompany each one, expressing hope for reconnection, without mentioning past hurts. Perhaps it was naive to think gifts could bridge the chasm that had formed between us. But as Christmas approached, I found myself hoping that this invitation meant something had changed, that maybe they were ready to welcome me back into the fold. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. I woke early, too anxious to sleep past 7 a.m. Despite having stayed up late, finishing some last-minute gift wrapping, I stood in front of my closet for nearly 30 minutes, changing my outfit 3 times before settling on a forest green sweater dress that my friend Sophia had once told me brought out the gold flecks in my hazel eyes. Professional, but not too formal, festive, without trying too hard. I carefully applied my makeup, aiming for a natural look that would not give Aunt Eleanor any reason to make comments about me trying to draw attention. I pulled my brown hair into a simple but elegant updo, securing it with the pearl hairpin that had belonged to my maternal grandmother. The beautifully wrapped presents sat on my dining table, a colorful collection that represented both my creative eye and my hope for reconciliation. I added a bottle of wine as a hostess gift, selecting one that was mid-range, neither cheap enough to be criticized, nor expensive enough to make it seem like I was showing off. As I was gathering my things, my phone rang. It was Sophia calling to wish me a Merry Christmas and give me a pep talk. "Remember, you are successful, intelligent, and kind," she said firmly. "If they cannot see that, it is their loss, not yours." "I know," I replied, though my voice betrayed my uncertainty. "I just wish I did not care so much about what they think." "That is because you have a good heart, Adri. Just promise me you will text if things get uncomfortable and you need an escape plan. I am only visiting my parents 10 minutes from Meadowbrook. I can come get you anytime." "Thanks, Soph. I will be fine," I assured her, more to convince myself than her. The drive to my father's house took almost an hour. As I left the city behind, the landscape changed from urban apartments to increasingly affluent suburbs. The sky, which had been clear when I set out, gradually filled with clouds, and by the time I reached Meadowbrook Light, snow had begun to fall, dusting the manicured lawns and designer Christmas displays with a fine powder. Each mile closer to my destination brought back memories I had tried to suppress. I passed the ice cream shop where my father used to take me after soccer practice before the divorce. There was the park where we had once had a family picnic, all of us laughing as Bradley chased squirrels across the grass. The elementary school where my cousins and I had performed in the holiday pageant, my father beaming proudly from the audience. I arrived 20 minutes early, too anxious to time my journey more precisely. Rather than going directly to the door, I parked on the street and sat in my car, gathering my courage. The house looked exactly as I remembered it, a large Tudor-style home with professionally installed Christmas lights outlining every architectural feature. An enormous wreath hung on the front door, and through the large bay window, I could see a towering Christmas tree sparkling with white lights and silver ornaments. The driveway was filled with expensive cars, a Mercedes SUV that I assumed belonged to my Uncle Frederick, a BMW that was likely my cousin Allison's, and several others that I did not recognize. My modest Honda Civic would look out of place among them, which was partly why I had chosen to park on the street. After a few deep breaths, I collected the gifts from my trunk and made my way up the shoveled walkway. The sound of laughter drifted through the door, along with the scent of roast turkey and cinnamon. For a moment, standing there with snow gently falling around me, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this would be the Christmas where things changed, where I would be welcomed back into the warmth of family. I shifted the packages in my arms and pressed the doorbell, hearing the familiar chime echo inside. The laughter continued uninterrupted. I waited, beginning to feel the cold seeping through my coat. Just as I was considering ringing again, the door swung open. Aunt Eleanor stood there, her tall figure blocking the entrance. She wore an expensive-looking red dress with a gold necklace that I recognized as a family heirloom. For a split second, her face registered shock at seeing me. Then her expression shifted to something harder, as her eyes moved from my face to the packages in my arms and back again. "Adriana," she said my name, sounding like an accusation on her lips. She made no move to invite me in, instead gripping the edge of the door, as if preparing to close it. "Merry Christmas, Aunt Eleanor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad invited me to dinner." She looked over her shoulder briefly, then back at me. Her eyes narrowed as she rolled them dramatically. "We do not want you here," she said coldly. "Go ruin someone else's holiday." The shock of her words rendered me speechless. As she shifted slightly, I caught a glimpse past her into the dining room. The entire family was already seated around the table, plates filled with food, glasses raised in what appeared to be a toast. My grandmother at one end, my father at the other, cousins, and their partners filling the sides. All laughing, none of them looking toward the door. I spotted my father, his head thrown back in laughter at something Uncle Frederick had said. He did not look up, did not acknowledge the confrontation happening at his front door. Whether he could not hear, or chose not to intervene, the result was the same silence where there should have been a defense. The packages suddenly felt heavy in my arms. I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. "Got it," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the sound of clinking glasses and conversation from inside. I turned and walked back down the path, snow now falling more heavily, individual flakes landing on my eyelashes and melting into tears I refused to acknowledge were my own. The sanctuary of my car could not come quickly enough. I dumped the packages onto the passenger seat and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Only then did I allow the first sob to escape, a harsh sound that seemed to echo in the confined space. My phone buzzed with a text notification. With trembling hands, I pulled it from my pocket to see a message from Sophia. "How's it going? Family being nice?" I could barely see through my tears as I typed. "They didn't let me in. Aunt Eleanor told me to go ruin someone else's holiday. They were already eating dinner. Dad saw but did nothing." 3 dots appeared, immediately followed by a string of outraged messages. "What? I'm coming to get you. Where are you?" "In my car outside the house. Don't come. I just need a minute." As I sat there, more painful memories surfaced, ones I had buried deep. The time my invitation to Allison's graduation party got lost in the mail. The family vacation photos my cousin Bradley had accidentally tagged me in on social media, showing a trip to the beach I had known nothing about. The way my father had forgotten to mention he was walking Allison down the aisle at her wedding, until I asked why he needed his suit pressed that weekend. Each slight had been explainable on its own. Together they formed a pattern I had tried to ignore for too long. I started the engine, needing to be anywhere but here. As I pulled away from the curb, I noticed my father's neighbor, Catherine, watching curiously from her window. Great. Now the neighborhood would have fresh gossip about James's rejected daughter. I drove aimlessly for several minutes before finding myself at Lakeside Park, a public space that remained open year-round. The parking lot was nearly empty on Christmas Day, with just a few cars belonging to people walking their dogs or getting fresh air between family obligations. I parked facing the partially frozen lake and called my mother. "Sweetheart, how is dinner going?" she asked, the sounds of the hospital where she worked the holiday shift audible in the background. "It is not," I said, my voice breaking. Aunt Eleanor turned me away at the door. They were already eating. Dad did not even come to the door. The stream of creative expletives that followed reminded me that my gentle mother had a fierce protective streak. I am calling your father right now, she declared. No, Mom, please do not. It will just make things worse, I begged. I do not want to ruin your Christmas, too. You are not ruining anything, she insisted. They are the ones behaving abominably. After several minutes of conversation, I managed to convince her not to call. I will be fine, I promised. I am going to figure out a way to salvage the day. As we talked, I remembered a flyer I had seen at my local coffee shop. The Riverside Community Center was hosting a Christmas meal for people who had nowhere else to go. I had even considered volunteering before receiving my father's invitation. Mom, I think I know what I am going to do with all these family gifts, I said, an idea forming. What's that, honey? The community center downtown is serving Christmas dinner to people in need. I bet they could use these as donations or door prizes. That sounds like a wonderful idea, my mother said, pride evident in her voice. Taking something painful and making it beautiful. That is who you are, Adriana. After ending the call, I programmed the community center's address into my GPS. It was only 15 minutes away, in a part of town my father's family would likely never visit. The Riverside Community Center was housed in a former church, its red brick exterior festooned with simple but cheerful decorations. As I approached carrying my stack of family gifts, a woman with curly gray hair and a bright red sweater held the door open for me. Looks like Santa needed some help, she joked warmly. I am Rachel, the volunteer coordinator. Are those donations? Yes, I nodded, introducing myself. I thought they might bring someone joy today. You have no idea how perfect your timing is, Rachel said, leading me into a large hall where tables had been set up in long rows. About 50 people of all ages were already seated with volunteers serving plates of traditional Christmas food. We always try to have a small gift for everyone, but we came up short this year. These will help tremendously. As I helped arrange the gifts on a table near the Christmas tree in the corner, Rachel asked if I would like to stay for dinner. Actually, I said, surprising myself, would it be okay if I helped serve? I do not really have anywhere else to be today. We would love the help, Rachel beamed, handing me an apron with candy canes printed on it. For the next hour, I found myself moving between tables, filling water glasses, serving slices of pie, and most importantly, listening to stories. There was Harold, an 82-year-old veteran, whose wife had passed away 3 years ago. A young mother named Lily, with 2 small children, who had left an abusive relationship and was spending her first Christmas in a new city. College students unable to afford flights home, elderly people without family nearby, and individuals whose circumstances had led them to this shared table. As I refilled Harold's coffee cup, he looked up at me with kind eyes. Not where you thought you would be spending Christmas, is it, young lady? I shook my head briefly, explaining what had happened. Family can be who you are born to or who you choose, he said, patting my hand. Looks to me like you are making good choices today. His words warmed something inside me that had been frozen since Aunt Eleanor closed the door in my face. I realized I had found more genuine connection in this room full of strangers than I had felt with my biological family in years. I was in the middle of serving apple pie to a table of college students when a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. The double doors banged open, letting in a gust of cold air and snowflakes. And there, looking completely out of place in his expensive camel hair coat, stood my father. Adriana, he called out, scanning the room frantically until his eyes landed on me. Adriana, thank God. The entire room went silent. 50 pairs of eyes swiveled between me and the well-dressed man who had just burst in shouting my name. I stood frozen pie server still in hand as my father strode toward me, his face flushed either from the cold or emotion. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel appeared at my side, her posture protective. Sir, this is a community event. Is everything okay? My father looked at her, then back at me, seemingly at a loss for words now that he had found me. I need to talk to my daughter, he finally said. There has been a huge misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, I repeated, anger suddenly replacing shock. I set down the pie server carefully and removed my apron, handing it to Rachel. May we use the side room for a few minutes? I asked her. She nodded, concern evident in her eyes. Just call if you need anything, she said pointedly, giving my father a look that clearly communicated she would be watching. I led my father to a small office off the main hall, closing the door behind us, but leaving it slightly ajar. I stood with my arms crossed, waiting for him to speak. Adriana, what Eleanor did was completely out of line. He began, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. No one knew she would do that. We thought you had decided not to come. You invited me, Dad. I accepted. I was there on time with gifts. My voice was steady, despite the storm of emotions inside me. I know, he said, looking genuinely distressed. Eleanor told everyone you had called to cancel. We were all disappointed, but she said you were spending the holiday with your mother instead. And you believed that without checking with me, I asked. You could not take 30 seconds to text and confirm. He had the grace to look ashamed. I should have. You are right. How did you even know I was here? After we started eating, Allison asked why you had canceled. Something about Eleanor's answer must have seemed off to her. She kept pressing, and Eleanor got defensive. He sighed heavily. Then Catherine from next door called. She saw the whole thing through her window, how Eleanor turned you away. She called Patricia to ask if everything was okay, because she saw you leave upset. I closed my eyes, briefly picturing the scene. So you knew I was at the door. You just did not bother to come check. I did not know, Adriana. I swear I did not hear the doorbell. We were all talking loudly, and Eleanor volunteered to answer it. When she came back, she just said it was carolers. And you did nothing when you found out the truth. My voice rose slightly. No, that is why I am here. As soon as Catherine called, there was, well, chaos is not an exaggeration. Allison started yelling at Eleanor, demanding to know what she had done. Your grandmother became very upset. I tried calling you immediately, but you did not pick up. I glanced at my phone and saw 3 missed calls. I had silenced it after texting Sophia. We have been driving around looking for you for almost an hour, he continued. Allison and Bradley are checking other places. When I remembered you mentioning this community center once, I thought it was worth a try. I studied my father's face, looking for signs of deception. His eyes, so similar to my own, held what appeared to be genuine distress. Even if what you are saying is true, I said slowly, it does not erase years of being treated like an unwanted obligation. Today was just the most honest anyone has been about it. That is not fair, he protested, but weakly. We have always invited you to family events. Have you? Because I stopped receiving invitations to most gatherings years ago. The few times I was included, I was treated like an intruder. That was Eleanor's doing, he admitted, shoulders slumping. We just found out she has been intercepting invitations, telling us you declined, telling you events were canceled. But Adriana, that does not excuse my role in this. I should have made more effort. I should have protected you better. The admission hit me like a physical blow. All those missed birthdays, holidays, celebrations I had attributed to general family indifference had been the work of one person with an active agenda to exclude me. Why? I asked. Why would she do that? Jealousy partly, my father said, looking tired. She never had children of her own, and she was always extremely close to Patricia, protective of their friendship. I think she saw you as a threat to the new family we created. That is twisted, I said. Yes, it is. And inexcusable. He took a step toward me. Please come back with me. Everyone wants to see you, especially your grandmother. Christmas dinner is ruined anyway. Eleanor has been asked to leave. I shook my head slowly. I cannot just walk out on these people. I made a commitment to help serve the meal. My father looked around as if seeing the community center for the first time. Then let me help too, he said, surprising me. And afterward, please consider coming back to the house. Give us a chance to make this right." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Rachel poked her head in. "Everything okay in here?" "Yes," I said, making a quick decision. "Rachel, this is my father, James. He would like to help serve the meal if that is all right." Rachel raised an eyebrow but nodded. "We can always use more hands. There is another apron in the kitchen." As Rachel led my father away, I noticed Harold watching me from his table, a knowing smile on his face. I walked over to him. "Family drama?" he asked. "How could you tell?" I replied with a small laugh. "Been around long enough to recognize the signs," he said. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" I looked over at my father, now awkwardly tying an apron around his expensive clothes. "I am not sure yet. Part of me wants to forgive and try again. Part of me wants to protect myself from more hurt." Harold nodded sagely. "Both valid. But remember, this forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It is about creating space for a different future." My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Where are you? Are you okay?" I quickly filled her in on what had happened and where I was. Her response was immediate. "Coming to you. No way am I letting you face this alone." As I returned to serving, I watched my father interacting with the community center guests. His initial discomfort was obvious, but he was trying asking people's names, listening to their stories, with what appeared to be genuine interest. It was a side of him I had rarely seen. When Sophia arrived 10 minutes later, bundled in her red coat with snowflakes in her dark hair, I felt a rush of gratitude for her unwavering friendship. She hugged me tightly, then pulled back to examine my face. "You okay?" she asked. "Getting there," I replied. "A lot has happened in the last hour." I introduced her to Rachel, Harold, and the others I had met, deliberately leaving my father for last. When they shook hands, Sophia's expression was coolly polite. "So you are the famous James," she said. "Adriana has told me so much about you." From her tone, it was clear she did not mean this as a compliment. My father had the good sense to look uncomfortable. "Not all of it flattering, I imagine," he said. "Not much of it, no," Sophia confirmed. She turned to me. "What is the plan, Adri? Whatever you decide, I am with you." "I am going to finish helping here," I said firmly. "Then, I think I need to go back to the house, if only to talk to Grandma. She deserves an explanation." Sophia nodded. "Then I am coming with you." As we returned to serving the meal, my phone continued to buzz with messages from Allison and Bradley, expressing their horror at what had happened and begging me to come to the house. I replied that I would be there later, after fulfilling my commitment at the community center. For the next hour, we worked side by side, my chosen family and my biological father, serving food to those who had gathered at this unlikely Christmas table. And despite everything that had happened that day, or perhaps because of it, I felt a strange sense of peace beginning to form. The community center meal was scheduled to continue until 4:30 p.m., with volunteers cleaning up afterward. Around 3:15, my father received a call that changed our plans. "It is Patricia," he said, his face paling, as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Your grandmother is not feeling well. The paramedics are on their way." My heart dropped. "What happened?" "The argument continued after I left to find you. Eleanor said some things that upset her greatly. Patricia says her blood pressure is very high and she is having chest pains." Without hesitation, I turned to Rachel. "I am so sorry, but I need to go. My grandmother is having a medical emergency." "Go, go," Rachel urged, waving away my apology. "Family comes first." Sophia immediately grabbed our coats. "I will drive," she said. "You are both too upset." The 15-minute drive to my father's house felt endless. My father kept trying to call for updates, but neither Patricia nor anyone else was answering. I sat in the back seat, a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest, while Sophia navigated the snowy roads with careful speed. "She has had heart problems before," my father explained, his voice tight with worry. "A minor attack 2 years ago. The doctor said to avoid stress." When we finally turned onto Maple Avenue, we could see the ambulance in the driveway, its lights flashing, but siren silent. We parked behind Cousin Allison's BMW and rushed toward the house. The front door stood open, and we entered to find the paramedics in the living room, attending to my grandmother, who was lying on the sofa. Her face was pale, an oxygen mask covering her nose and mouth. Allison, who had completed medical school and was now a resident, stood nearby speaking quietly with one of the emergency responders. "Grandma," I gasped, moving toward her. Her eyes flickered open at the sound of my voice, and she reached out a trembling hand. I took it gently, noting how much frailer it felt than the last time I had seen her. "Adriana," she whispered through the mask, "you came." "Of course I came," I said, fighting back tears. "I was always going to come." Allison approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her blood pressure spiked dangerously high, but the medication is bringing it down. They do not think it is a heart attack, but they want to take her to the hospital for observation. "What happened?" I asked, looking around the room. Patricia stood by the fireplace, her mascara smudged from crying. Uncle Frederick and Aunt Diana sat in armchairs nearby, looking shell-shocked. Bradley paced by the window, phone in hand. Conspicuously absent was Aunt Eleanor. "After Dad left to find you, things got ugly," Allison explained in a low voice. "Grandma demanded to know exactly what Aunt Eleanor had said to you. When Eleanor admitted she had turned you away, Grandma became extremely upset. She said she had been asking about you for years, sending you invitations and gifts through Eleanor, never understanding why you never responded." "I never received anything," I said, the pieces falling into place. "We know that now," Allison continued. "Eleanor finally admitted she had been intercepting communications both ways for years, telling us you wanted nothing to do with the family, telling you that you were not welcome. Apparently, she even redirected gifts and cards." "But why?" I asked, though I already knew part of the answer from what my father had told me. "She claimed she was protecting the family," Bradley said, joining our conversation. "That you and your mother were bitter about the divorce and wanted to cause problems. But really, I think she was afraid." "Afraid of me?" I asked incredulously. "Of losing her place?" Allison clarified. "When Uncle James remarried, she and Patricia became very close. I think she was afraid your presence would threaten that relationship, remind Patricia of her history with your father." The paramedics began preparing to transport my grandmother to the hospital. As they were transferring her to a stretcher, the front door opened again, and Aunt Eleanor walked in, stopping short when she saw me. "What is she doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The room went silent. Even the paramedics paused momentarily. "I invited her," my father said firmly. "She is family, Eleanor. She has always been family." "After everything I have done for this family," Eleanor began, her voice rising, "you would choose her, the daughter of the woman who tried to ruin your life." "My mother never tried to ruin anyone's life," I said, stepping forward. "She picked up the pieces of hers after it was shattered. She worked multiple jobs to support me while you all lived in luxury. She never once spoke ill of any of you in front of me, even when I came home crying after being excluded from yet another family event." Aunt Eleanor's face flushed. "You were never excluded. You chose not to be part of this family." "That is a lie," I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. "You made that choice for me, and for everyone else here. You intercepted invitations, gifts, messages, all to keep me separated from my family. Why? Because you were jealous. Because you wanted to be the center of everyone's world." "You know nothing about it," she hissed. "I know that true family does not manipulate and lie," I replied. "I know that the strangers at the community center showed me more genuine welcome today than you have in years. I know that whatever your issues are with my mother, or with me, they are your problems to solve, not ours to bear." My grandmother's voice, weak but determined, cut through the tension. "Eleanor, that is enough." All eyes turned to her. The paramedics had paused in their work, sensing the importance of what was happening. "Martha, you need to rest," Eleanor said, her tone instantly shifting to one of concern. "What I need," my grandmother said, removing her oxygen mask, despite the paramedic's gentle objection, "is for my family to be whole again. What you have done, Eleanor, is unforgivable. You have robbed me of years with my granddaughter. You have created division where there should have been healing." "I was protecting this family," Eleanor insisted. "No," grandmother replied firmly. "You were protecting yourself, your position, your influence. That is not love, Eleanor. That is control." She looked around the room, her eyes landing on each family member in turn. "This family has allowed secrets and manipulation to poison us for too long. No more." She turned to my father. "James, you failed your daughter by not seeing what was happening, by choosing the easier path of believing what you were told, rather than investigating the truth." My father nodded, accepting the rebuke without defense. "And Eleanor," my grandmother continued, "until you can acknowledge the harm you have done and make genuine amends, I think it would be best if you did not join family gatherings." A collective gasp went around the room. In all my life I had never heard my gentle grandmother issue such an ultimatum. "You cannot be serious," Eleanor said, her voice barely audible. "I have never been more serious," grandmother replied. "Now, I believe these kind medical professionals need to take me to the hospital. Adriana, will you come with me?" "Of course," I said immediately. "And James, when you return from the hospital, I expect you to make this right with your daughter." Her gaze, though weakened by age and stress, still held the authority it had commanded throughout my childhood. As the paramedics resumed their work preparing to wheel my grandmother out to the ambulance, Aunt Eleanor stood frozen in place, her face a mask of shock and anger. Without another word, she turned and walked out the door, the sound of her car starting and driving away moments later. The crisis had reached its climax, and in its wake, something had fundamentally shifted in our family dynamic. As I followed the stretcher out to the ambulance, Sophia at my side, and my father and Allison behind me, I felt both exhausted and strangely liberated, as if a weight I had carried for years had finally been named and set down. The hours at the hospital passed in a blur of fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs, and hushed conversations. My grandmother's condition stabilized quickly once her blood pressure was under control, but the doctors wanted to keep her overnight for observation, given her age and medical history. "You should all go home," she insisted from her hospital bed, around 7 p.m. "It is still Christmas. There is no reason for it to be entirely ruined." After extracting promises that we would call immediately if anything changed, my father, Allison Bradley, and I left Uncle Frederick to stay with grandmother and headed back to the house. Sophia insisted on coming with me, a silent support I was profoundly grateful for. When we arrived, Patricia had rallied admirably in our absence. The dining room table had been reset, the food reheated, and a subdued but determined air of festivity restored. "I thought we could try again," she said somewhat nervously as we entered. "It seemed important after everything to salvage what we could of the day." It was the most genuine interaction I had ever had with my stepmother, and I found myself seeing her in a new light. Perhaps she had been as much a victim of Aunt Eleanor's manipulations as I had been positioned as an unwitting wedge between a father and daughter. "Thank you," I said simply. "That was thoughtful." The dinner that followed was unlike any family gathering I had experienced before. The absence of Aunt Eleanor changed the dynamic, completely allowing conversations that had been suppressed for years to finally emerge. "We have gifts for you," Allison said, seeming embarrassed. "We always get you something, even though Eleanor told us you never wanted to exchange presents." She led me to the Christmas tree, where several wrapped packages bore my name. The sight brought a lump to my throat. "I had gifts for all of you too," I said, "but I donated them at the community center." "That was a wonderful thing to do," Patricia said, surprising me again. "Perhaps we could package up some of this food and bring it there tomorrow. It seems like they do important work." My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since our return from the hospital, finally spoke. "Adriana, could we talk privately for a moment?" We stepped into his study, a room I had rarely been allowed to enter as a child. He closed the door and turned to face me, his eyes red-rimmed from what I realized had been tears. "I have failed you completely," he said without preamble. "Not just today, but for years. I allowed my guilt over the divorce, my desire for a clean slate with Patricia, to cloud my judgment and neglect my responsibility to you." "Dad," I began, but he held up a hand. "Please let me say this. I have no excuse. I chose to believe what was easiest, to believe that you were choosing distance, that you were angry and needed space. I never questioned why that would be the case, never fought for our relationship the way a father should." His voice broke on the last words, and I found myself in the unexpected position of comforting him as he finally released years of suppressed emotion. "I do not expect forgiveness right away," he continued after composing himself, "but I am asking for a chance to make amends, to rebuild what we lost. If you are willing." The question hung between us, weighted with years of hurt, but also with possibility. I thought of Harold's words at the community center. Forgiveness is not about erasing the past, but creating space for a different future. "I would like to try," I said finally. "But it will take time and effort. Real effort, not just words." "Anything," he promised. "Whatever it takes." When we rejoined the others, the atmosphere had lightened somewhat. Patricia approached me hesitantly. "I want you to know," she said, "I never disliked you, Adriana. I thought you disliked me, which was understandable given the circumstances. Eleanor convinced me it was better to give you space rather than force a relationship." "I never disliked you either," I admitted. "I was hurt and confused, but I never blamed you for the divorce. That was between my parents." She nodded, relief evident in her expression. "I would like to get to know you if you are open to it. Your father talks about your design work with such pride." "He does?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "All the time," she confirmed. "He has your agency's website bookmarked on his computer. He shows me whenever you get a new project listed in your portfolio." This small revelation shifted something inside me. The idea that my father had been silently following my career, proud, but unable to express it directly, added another layer to the complex picture emerging of our fractured family. As we finally sat down to dinner, Sophia beside me, I found myself sharing stories of my life, that my family had missed my promotion to senior designer, the small but growing freelance business I had started on the side, the half marathon, had run the previous spring. In turn, my cousins filled me in on their lives. Allison was engaged to a fellow doctor she had met during residency. Bradley had switched careers from finance to teaching and was now working with underprivileged youth. I learned my father had taken up woodworking as a hobby, and Patricia had indeed been trying to master Italian cooking in preparation for a trip to Italy they were planning for their anniversary. As the evening progressed, I had an idea. "Would you all consider coming back to the community center with me tomorrow? They could use help with the Boxing Day meal, and it would mean a lot to me to introduce you to the people I met there." To my surprise, everyone agreed readily. My father went further. "I would like to do more than just volunteer," he said. "I want to make a donation to support their meal program for the coming year." "Dad, that would be amazing," I said, genuinely moved by the gesture. As the night drew to a close, we exchanged contact information directly, no longer willing to rely on family gatherings as our only point of connection. Allison and I made plans for lunch the following week. Bradley asked if I would consider helping design materials for the nonprofit he volunteered with. My father suggested a standing monthly dinner. When it was time to leave, the goodbye was nothing like the hello had been. Hugs were exchanged, promises made, to call and text plans set in motion for a New Year's gathering that would include both Sophia and my mother if she was willing. As we stood on the porch, gentle snow still falling, My father impulsively suggested, "Snowball fight, for old time's sake." Before I knew it, we were all in the front yard laughing and pelting each other with hastily made snowballs, acting like the children we had once been together, before adult complications tore us apart. In that moment, breathless and cold, but somehow warmer inside than I had felt in years, I caught a glimpse of what family could be, not perfect, but present, not without conflict, but willing to face it honestly. When Sophia and I finally left my car, loaded with belated Christmas gifts and containers of leftovers, I felt exhausted, but hopeful. The day had been nothing like I expected, both worse, and somehow better than I could have imagined. "You okay?" Sophia asked as we drove away, the lights of my father's house receding in the rearview mirror. "I think I will be," I replied, and for the first time in years, I actually believed it. 1 month later, my small apartment was filled to bursting with a mix of people I would never have expected to see together. My mother chatted comfortably with Patricia in the kitchen as they prepared appetizers. My father and Harold from the community center discovered a shared interest in military history and were deep in conversation by the bookshelf. Sophia and Allison had become fast friends and were planning a joint volunteer project at the hospital. Bradley was showing Rachel from the community center photos of the students in his program. It was New Year's Day, and somehow miraculously, we had managed to create a gathering that bridged the various parts of my formerly fragmented life. The month since Christmas had been a time of adjustment and healing. My father had followed through on his promise to fund the meal program at the Riverside Community Center, and had even begun volunteering there regularly on weekends. The experience seemed to be changing him, softening edges I had not even realized were there. My grandmother had recovered fully from her health scare, and was now seated in my most comfortable chair, directing the arrangement of food on the table, with the authority of someone half her age. She had insisted on teaching me several family recipes, creating opportunities for us to spend time together after so many years apart. "Adriana," she called, beckoning me over. "I found another album with baby pictures I thought you might like to see." As we paged through the photographs, she pointed out family resemblances, told stories I had never heard, filled in gaps in my understanding of our shared history. It was a gift beyond measure, this reclaiming of my place in the family narrative. Aunt Eleanor remained conspicuously absent from our gatherings. There had been attempts at reconciliation, mostly initiated by my father, but she remained convinced she had been right to protect the family as she had. My grandmother maintained her position that until Eleanor could truly acknowledge the harm she had caused, she could not be included. "It is not about punishment," Grandmother explained when I asked about it. "It is about honesty. Without truth, there can be no healing." I was seeing a therapist to help process the rapid changes in my family situation. Dr. Wilson had been invaluable in helping me establish healthy boundaries while reopening my heart to relationships that had caused me pain in the past. "Reconciliation does not mean pretending the hurt never happened," she reminded me in our last session. "It means creating a new relationship with full awareness of both the pain and the possibility." That awareness guided my interactions with my father especially. We were rebuilding slowly with weekly phone calls and regular dinners. Sometimes our conversations were easy and light. Other times we navigated difficult topics about the past, both of us learning to speak truth even when uncomfortable. "The hardest lesson for me," my father had admitted, during one such conversation, "has been recognizing how easily people believe what is convenient for them to believe. I wanted to think you were pulling away because it absolved me of responsibility. It was easier than acknowledging my failure to fight for our relationship." That insight had struck me deeply, causing me to examine my own life for places where I might be doing the same thing, choosing comfortable illusions over harder truths. Sophia remained my steadfast support throughout this journey of family reconciliation. She celebrated my victories and provided perspective when I became too caught up in old patterns. "Remember who you are outside of their narrative," she would remind me. "You built a beautiful life even when they were not in it. That strength is still yours." As our New Year's gathering moved to the dining table, my father tapped his glass for attention. "I would like to propose a toast," he said, looking around at the unlikely assembly of people. "To new beginnings, hard-earned, to truth even when it hurts, and to my daughter Adriana, who has shown more grace and forgiveness than many of us deserved." The warmth of the moment washed over me, healing places I had not realized were still wounded. Later, as we were cleaning up, my phone rang with an unexpected call. It was Allison. "I have news," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "We have set a date for the wedding, June 15th. And Adri, I want you to be one of my bridesmaids." The invitation, so casual, and yet so profound in what it represented, brought tears to my eyes. 6 months ago, I would have been lucky to receive a wedding invitation at all. "I would be honored," I said. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Harold pulled me aside for a private word. "Remember what I told you at Christmas?" he asked. "About forgiveness, creating space for a different future." I nodded. "Looking around tonight," he said, gesturing to the mingled groups of people, "I would say, you have created something beautiful in that space." His words stayed with me long after everyone had gone, as I sat quietly in my apartment processing the journey from rejection to reconciliation that had begun just 1 month earlier. The path forward was not perfectly clear. There would be missteps and old wounds that might reopen. Aunt Eleanor's absence remained a complicated issue that would eventually need resolution. My mother and father's careful politeness around each other still held echoes of old pain. But, for the first time in years, I looked toward the next Christmas with cautious optimism rather than dread. I had learned that standing up for myself did not have to mean burning bridges that might one day be rebuilt. I had discovered that family could be both who you are born to and who you choose to love. And most importantly, I had found that even the deepest rejection could with time and truth transform into a new kind of belonging. Have you ever experienced a holiday rejection that eventually led to something unexpectedly positive? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of family reconciliation resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of healing and growth. Remember that sometimes our most painful moments can lead to our greatest transformations. Thank you for listening, and may your own family gatherings be filled with truth, grace, and second chances.